10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good evening and welcome. I am Jeanne McKnight, Planning Board Chair. This open meeting of the Needham Planning Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with current state regulations, and is being recorded. Public access to this meeting does not ensure there will be public participation unless required by law. No public hearings are on the agenda for this meeting, so this particular meeting will have no public comment. First, we'll confirm that all members of the planning board are present. When I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Martin Jacobs.
Present.
Adam Block.
Present.
Ted Owens.
Here.
Paul Alpert.
Present.
Yes, thank you. So we have all 5 members of the planning board here. We also have planning department staff, and I'll call your name and you also indicate your presence. Lee Newman, our planning director.
Present.
Alexandra Klee, our assistant planner.
I'm here.
All right, then. Now, usually at our meetings, we have other participants who are representing applicants. At this meeting, we actually have no other participants, so there will not be any other introductions to be made. Everyone, of course, be aware that others may be able to see you, and anything you share or state will be a matter of public record. And all supporting materials for this meeting, including the agenda, are available on the town's website, www.needham.gov, unless we otherwise note. Now, we have sort of ground rules for this meeting, and they're designed to allow for an accurate public record. I'll introduce each of the speakers on our agenda, and after they conclude their remarks, each board member will be asked by name for any comment, questions, or motions. And this is so that members of the public who might be listening in on their phone rather than zooming in will know who is speaking. And all votes taken at this meeting will be by roll call. Now, as we have customarily done during this time of Zoom meetings, I'll ask for a motion to continue this meeting to Wednesday, November 4th at 7:15 p.m. with the same Zoom ID number. If technical difficulties arise that prevent us from addressing all of the items on the agenda for this meeting.
So moved.
Mr. Jacobs has so moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Block has seconded that motion. So we will conduct a roll call on that motion. Mr. Jacobs.
Aye.
Mr. Block.
Aye.
Mr. Owens.
Aye.
Mr. Alpert.
Aye.
And the chair is aye. So we do have voted to continue this meeting on that contingency. So now I moved to the first item of our agenda, which is a request to extend the temporary occupancy permit. And this relates to major project site plan review number 2013-02 for the town of Needham. And the property is located at 1407 Central Avenue, Needham. And the property is known as the Jack Cogswell Building Project. And Lee Newman, would you like to, we have a letter, I should say. We have a letter from Stephen Gentili, project manager at our building design and construction department of the town. and the Permanent Public Building Committee of the town. And he asks for the extension. And he notes that there was a prior request to extend made on December 9th, 2019 for 60 days until February 7th, 2020. Then there was another request for an additional 60 days starting on February 7, 2020 until April 7, 2020. But the COVID-19 public health emergency disrupted normal business operations. So now another 60 days is requested for the same reason listed below. There actually seems to be a gap of time as I recite the dates of the extensions in that paragraph. But in any event, they are now asking for an extension until January 13th, 2021. And the letter notes that the outstanding items include something over which the contractor or the committee has very little control, and that is there's a need for a lot consolidation, which requires land court approval. And as I think we know, the courts are operating very short-staffed and many delays in any court proceeding. So it seems like the responsible things have been done, but they were just in wait mode. On June 17th, 2019, an attorney, Kevin Murphy, was appointed as title examiner. And then on October 31, 2019, that was just about a year ago, Attorney Murphy filed the report, and the final certified consolidation plan was expected to be completed at the end of December, I guess, 2019, but it hasn't happened.
Chair, I move that we approve the extension to January 13th, 2021 in light of the circumstances.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion for the extension by Mr. Owens, and that was seconded by Mr. Block. So I'll do a roll call vote on that. Mr. Jacobs.
Aye.
Mr. Block.
Aye.
Mr. Owens.
Aye.
Mr. Alpert.
Aye.
And the chair is aye, so that's approved unanimously. And is it right form or anything we will have to sign, or we send a letter, or how will that be handled, Lee?
I'll just handle it through a letter to the building inspector, letting him know that the temporary has been extended to that date.
Okay. So then next on our agenda is that we vote to request a project review fee pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53G of the General Laws, and relating to major project site plan special permit number 2012-07. And oh yes, that was the original plan for the entire area that includes the TripAdvisor and so forth back in 2012. And this particular review fee pertains to the proposed development by the Children's Hospital Corporation, and the property is located at 66 B Street, 360 First Avenue, 410 First Avenue, and 37A Street in Needham. And our planning director has provided us with a scope of work that she received from Beta Engineering for the peer review. And perhaps Lee, you want to speak to this?
Yes, I mean, I think at the time we reviewed this, the zoning change in the New England Business Center to accommodate this use, we received, as part of that review, data and information on parking, which enabled us to establish what the parking requirement for this new use would be. And we received trip generation use, which allowed us to compare the trip generation from this proposed medical facility to the underlying office use, which was currently approved at that project site. At that time, we had a peer review done by Beta, which informed the board on the zoning change that you ultimately finalized and went to town meeting for approval. Children's at that time had indicated that they were not prepared or ready to do the full traffic study. And it was understood and agreed that they would do a traffic study at the time the site plan special permit came in, and that Beta would be utilized to actually do the peer review on that component of the work. So this is just a continuation of the work that we did on the rezoning. Children's has filed the special permit. We received it early last week. I have reached out to Children's and shared with them the scope of work. And after your vote tonight, they are prepared to give us the monies to enable this to go forward. And the plan, the goal is to get you the peer review so that you have it on November 17th when you open the hearing on this application.
And yes, Mr. Block has a comment or question.
I have a couple of questions. I'm obviously new so I forgive my naivete. I'm curious what industry standards are here. First, my question is, I presume, if I read correctly some of the supporting material, that the applicant will ultimately reimburse the town for this expense. Is that correct?
The applicant is going to give us the monies before we actually authorize Beta to go forward with the work. So we will have monies from Children's at the end of this week to cover this dollar amount. And then there will be a contract that the town will have with Beta to enable the work to go forward.
And then I'm curious, I'd like to know what industry standard is. What I observe is that I'd like to know what's included in their overhead costs. Or if we typically get a breakdown, their overhead is 1.7. For every dollar we're spending on their direct cost, they're charging an overhead and a profit on top of their overhead. And maybe that's industry standard, I just don't know, but I'd just like to know what is industry standard with that. And if an overhead charge of 1.7 is, is industry standard. I don't mean to hold this up tonight, and I'm sure as a board we'll pass it and approve it, but I'd certainly like to know, Lee, if you can speak to what's industry standard based on what we've reviewed and accepted in the past. And I understand if you don't have that information immediately available, but maybe in a week or so you might have it. I don't know.
I can certainly get you that information. I will say that Beta is one of the contractors that the town has an overall arching contract with, and we do a lot of work with that particular vendor. So I can verify, although it has been reviewed by the engineering department and they didn't call it out as an issue of, a fee that was outside of the norm, but I can check and I'll be glad to get that information to you.
Lee, would it be fair to say that Children's Hospital or the council didn't call it out either?
No, they didn't call it out as an issue.
Okay. Mr. Jacobs posed that question.
Sorry,
about
should have identified
Children's.
Yeah.
Whether the Children's Hospital, who will be paying this, had any concern about it, and the answer was that they did not raise that as an issue. Mr. Owens or Mr. Alpert, do either of you have a comment or question?
No, I have, this is Paul Alpert. I have no comment or question, and I'm prepared to make a motion if you wish to have it now, Madam Chair.
I myself have a question, but I do want to give Mr. Owens an opportunity before I ask my question.
Thank you. I have no comments or question.
Okay. I note that on it's the second page of the proposal where what will be done is outlined. There's something that's described as task 4, future conditions and traffic operations analysis. And it says, review the future no build 2026 scenario including other planned development projects in the area and general traffic growth rate. And then review that scenario, which includes the addition of the project-generated trips. I want to make sure that there are two things that are happening right directly in the area that's affected by this project and that this project would be affected by. And that is, number one, the proposed Highland Avenue, Needham Street State Highway renovation project, which is due to start soon in at Needham end of Highland Avenue. And as I read a summary of that project on the website of the Newton Chamber of Commerce, it said that the Needham Street portion will be starting next summer. So it seems that, this will be ongoing for quite a while, that traffic may be affected by that, and the consultant should take the time frame for that into account. Maybe it's going to be all finished, and it may even be a traffic improvement to the area at various intersections. I'm not sure. I haven't seen that in the presentations about this project as to whether it's going to result in any increase or in any improvement in traffic flow along the road or in the intersection, but they should take that into account, certainly. And the other is the Northland Newton Development Project, which is a 28-acre project that is already starting, really. Tenants of that project are leaving the site, so site prep can start. And that's at the corner of Oak Street and Highland Avenue. And considerable amount of planning went into that project. There's all kinds of traffic reports and expectations for future traffic flow resulting from that project. So I just want to make sure that that phrase in item 4, that is future conditions and traffic operations analysis, that other planned development projects in the area will be taken into account. That will include, I think it should include these two projects.
Well, I think our consultant is going to be looking at the projects that their consultant identifies as affecting the build out. And so I think what you're telling me is you want to make sure that our consultant is aware of the Northland project and the improvements along Highland Avenue when they're reviewing the profile that VHB has actually put together.
Yes, that's right. So if VHB ignores those projects, says nothing about them, that
Right.
seems like that should be an issue.
Right. I understand.
Yeah, and given that it does have that wording, and if you explain, we are concerned about that. I don't think that needs any change to the proposal, but I just wanted to raise that issue myself.
Okay.
All right. Well, if there's no other comment or question, then Mr. Block, yes.
I apologize, Madam Chair. This is my final comment. Their proposal speaks of 2 meetings with the planning board and 2 meetings.
Up to, I think up to 2 meetings.
Correct. And 2 meetings with town staff. So that's a total of 4 meetings for which they seem to be charging 36 hours.
Well, what they've done is they put aside that many hours, but this contract is a maximum at the dollar amount stated. We may not use the entire dollar amount.
Is that common for peer review, that they may put together a proposal for 21,000 and then they end up using half of it? What's the likelihood that they would get to most of it?
The likelihood that they'll get to most of it is probably high. The last time we did this review with on the zoning piece of it, there was a lot of back and forth with VHB just in terms of getting the data. And I think they were a little gun shy that they would be spending all this time with VHB and it wouldn't be a concise process, which is why that's why that time was allocated.
Okay.
So they'll be present at up to 2. I anticipated if the planning board meeting, certainly on the 17th, if there are issues that come out of that, the planning board meeting at the following, at the continuation of the hearing, They'll be reviewing their comments with Tony and I in advance of the meeting. Any questions that come up, we'll be reviewing before you even see the report. And then any back and forth that's required with VHB just to get clarification and answers to questions and additional data.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so what's up being, Mr. Alpert, yes.
Yeah, I just want to make it clear on the record because Mr. Block is raising a lot of issues about the cost and pursuant to our subdivision regulations and procedural rules of the planning board, section 9, project review fees. And I haven't read it carefully, but I assume Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53G. This is money that is being funded by the applicant and is going into a special fund to be held by the town. And Beta is to charge based not on a flat fee, but on the amount of their services actually performed. And if they wind up not incurring $21,000 worth of expense, the balance will be refunded to the applicant. And I don't recall seeing it, but I would assume that if Beta comes back to us and says we've used up, I'll throw out a number, $19,000 worth of time, and we still have a lot to go, so we need more money in the kitty. We have the authority to go back to the applicant and say, you need to put more money into the fund for us to continue. So the town is not paying for this, and this is an estimate. And to the extent that it's not used, it will go back to the applicant.
Mhm. And you're right, Mr. Alpert, I read the reg, and it does say that if the consulting services end up being more than originally estimated and paid for, the applicant must come up with the additional money. And if not, the rules actually say that the permit will be denied.
Oh, and I just thought of something else on that. I was either chair or vice chair. So I was involved at one time when we had such a fund for Rockwood Lane, and the developer of Rockwood Lane was challenging the fees that were being charged. It may have even been by Beta. I don't remember whether it was Beta who was the town's consultant on that. But if the fees do get high, the applicant does have the right and the ability to complain and to bring it before the board. And I believe that in the case of Rockwood Lane, it was not only brought before the board, but it was also discussed with the town manager and the town engineer to resolve the issues where the applicant, in the case of Rockwood Lane, the developer, was complaining that the town's consultant was spending too much time. So if the fees get up there and Children's Hospital thinks that it's too much money is going into this, they have their rights and their ability to bring that back to us. It's their money, not ours.
All right. Okay. So good comments about the process. I remember that as well. So the amount of money that the amount totals, the total cost is $21,175, that we're being asked to to request as for the peer review transportation impact and access study. So might I have a motion to that effect?
Sure. This is Paul Alpert, and I move that we hire and we direct our planning director to enter into an agreement for the hire of Beta as the planning board's consultant to review the traffic study that has been presented by the applicant for Children's Hospital, and that we assess the fee of $21,175 to be held and expended pursuant to Section 9 of our subdivision regulations and procedural rules.
This is Ted, I second.
Can I just
The
comment?
second was by Mr. Owens?
Yes, it was.
Yes, all right then.
Just quick
Is
discussion.
there further discussion on that motion?
I just have a comment, really. I think the motion is fine, but I think it should make mention of the statute as well.
Fine. So this motion is also for the hiring of the consultant and the assessment of the fees. It's pursuant to Section 9 of our subdivision regulations and procedural rules, and pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53G.
Thank you.
Okay. So I will call the roll on the vote for that motion. Mr. Jacobs,
Aye.
Mr. Bullock. You are muted, Adam.
I apologize, Madam Chair. Aye.
Mr. Owens,
Aye.
Mr. Albert,
Aye.
and the chair is aye. So that motion is approved unanimously. Right, so then the next item on our agenda is the determination of use category under zoning. A massage therapy service is proposed in the Center Business District in the building where for space on the second floor above Harvey's Hardware. And the question from our building inspector, he wanted to make sure that we were satisfied that this is an allowed use. And the suggestion was that it is an allowed use in the Central Business District, and I'm looking at my zoning bylaw, as a craft, consumer, professional, or commercial service establishment dealing directly with the general public and not enumerated elsewhere in this section.
What page are you on, Madam Chair?
Yes.
What page is that a reference of?
That is on page 39, is the table of use regulations that includes the Central Business District. And in the Central Business District and in many of the other business districts listed here, that is a use allowed by right. Now, it's possible, I think it was mentioned in an email communication between our building inspector, David Roach, and our planning director, Lee Newman, that the use might require more parking, might demand more parking than whatever the original use of that space was. And it is possible parking waiver will be sought, but I don't think that analysis has been done yet. But I think the question right now is does that use of a massage therapy service fall within the listed use of craft, consumer, professional, or commercial service establishment dealing directly with the general public? Any comment? Mr. Alpert?
Yes, I believe that it's a consumer service.
Okay.
I would.
And do we need to specify that in our view, it's a consumer service? Or is it sufficient to say that it's, one of these things?
I think it's sufficient to say that it's one of them.
Yes, yes, I feel the same way. So any comment on Mr. Jacobs, Mr. Block, Mr. Owens?
I just have a question. I know it's not in the Center Business District, but the Elements Massage operation, did they come in as a matter of right under some use category that we should be aware of?
They came in as I think we classified them as a professional service, a professional medical service. That for the laser resurfacing that ultimately happened, I think, in the building where Trader Joe's is and then where we just now did the transfer. That came in as a professional service, medical. And the parking was calculated at 1 parking space for 200, not at an office use. That building was covered under an underlying special permit. That's why there was an amendment there, which grabbed them, but the underlying use was allowed by right.
This is Alex Klee. I think Marty's question was actually about the Elements Massage, which is kind of over near that.
The Shell
7-Eleven.
station, exactly.
Kind of across from the Heights Post Office.
Right.
The restaurant.
And
Okay,
in
I'm
my
sorry.
time, I don't know when that went in my time here, it was not a special permit by the planning board.
Then it would have gone in. I don't remember that coming in under our jurisdiction.
There is another, I think of it as a massage place next to the new Mexican or Latin restaurant across from the high school. And there's a Dunkin' Donuts near there too, if you know the place I mean. I think that's relatively new, but maybe the last 10 years.
Well, the ZBA has jurisdiction on that. I'd have to look at that to find out what the history was of that property.
Mhm, mhm.
And what the impact is on traffic or parking, because the use would obviously determine the effect on parking. Is that correct?
In terms
Yes,
of
I was,
In terms of what the parking requirement is, Dave, from part of the communication Dave and I had, he indicated that this proposed facility above Harvey's was going to be like 1 office, 200 square feet. It's going to have 1 employee. And then he thought that there were 2 parking spaces that the property owner had available to dedicate for this use.
Oh, that's great.
I was looking in the zoning bylaw under required parking for various uses, and it was just a quick look, but I didn't see any use like this listed.
The only case I can speak about was the laser and how we handled that. And I don't recall ever seeing a massage therapy.
There's a use that's listed under the parking table: medical, dental, and related health service structures or clinics, but it doesn't seem to be medical, dental, or related to medical and dental. But I'm sure, as we go forward with the permitting from this, that will be dealt with. We weren't asked to address that today. Right, we're not being asked.
I think Dave was going to classify it, I think, originally as a professional service. And so he wanted me to make sure that you viewed the use as being allowed. And I think you're just putting it within that general classification, saying it's one of those components. It's one of those.
Yes. All right. And then deal with,
We need a vote.
and then the parking, he'll have to deal with that too.
I think the parking probably you will not see. Don't you remember we changed the parking bylaw to allow for some flexibility, changes in use that required more parking, provided it didn't generate, I think, more than 10 additional parking spaces for the use. I mean, we did provide for flexibility in the downtown with that. So it's not just a change in the parking demand. They're allowed to increase it up to a certain number without it triggering a new permit.
Yeah, I was trying to remember how that worked.
This is the smallest
and,
square footage
you-
I'm sorry.
If you actually needed a waiver, but you
got-
don't need a waiver.
You got,
Okay.
you basically got out of the waiver, and this is a small enough square footage that is probably going to fall in that exception.
Mhm. Okay, so we don't need to worry about parking. Mr. Alpert?
Yeah, I would just like to make a general comment about this bylaw that jumped out at me when I reviewed this, which is that this is a catch-all use provision. It's all of these services that aren't enumerated elsewhere, something that we hadn't thought of before. And somebody comes in and says, okay, I have a consumer service, and consumer service can really be anything that's open to the public, that you're selling to the public, that's a service, which I think this is, and it's a use as of right. And it kind of bothers me that that's a use as of right and not as a special permit. Am I remembering correctly, Lee, that when we had the self-service storage in the industrial district, that was also brought in under a catch-all kind of a use that's not enumerated elsewhere, and that was a special permit?
That was brought on under an even broader category, because it was not within a class such as consumer or
Right.
professional not enumerated elsewhere. It was anything not enumerated elsewhere.
And that was special permit and not by right.
That's
What
correct.
What bothers me here is that we have this huge catch-all, which the phrase I like to use is a hole that you can drive a Mack truck through. That creates a use as of right. And I know we have difficulty bringing bylaw amendments to town meeting, and this would require a town meeting amendment that and a 2/3 vote. But I'd like to see us change that to a special permit use. But I digress from what's in front of us tonight.
Do you mean this, the massage therapy use as a standout use?
No, that entire category. That entire,
Across,
anything that's not enumerated elsewhere, that's a service, is an as of right use. And I think that if we're dealing something that the bylaw hasn't thought, that the planning board hadn't thought of before, and we have a general category that says, if we hadn't considered it before, so it's not enumerated elsewhere, we're going to have this catch-all category, which we have in some places and we don't have in other places. I think it should be by special permit and not as of right.
I think you'd have to look at what you specifically allow then and define it. Because I think what ended up happening was a lot of the consumer services uses that you would like, or professional service uses you would like, or craft uses you would like, never were enumerated. And this was used as a substitution for that work. And so,
Well, if we like it, then we'll grant the special permit.
well, I think that, and then the flip side of that is then you're creating all this extra process in the downtown, making it more difficult for business to open. So,
Yes, Mr. Owens has a comment.
If I may, I think this is an interesting topic, but not relevant to this agenda item.
I did say I digress.
Yes, you digress. That's exactly my point.
Yeah.
Which is, can we stay focused for at least 15 seconds? Do we think that this is an allowed use? I think we do.
Yes.
Does anybody disagree with that?
It appears that
Need a
nobody
motion?
disagrees with that, and it doesn't seem like something we need to take a vote on. Do you agree, Lee?
yes, Dave wanted me just to get a sense of the board.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So we can always discuss the issue that Mr. Albert raised at one of our long-term planning meetings when we consider zoning changes we might like to adopt.
Yeah, I'm happy to put that
Make a
issue
note of that.
on the agenda and discuss it, but it's not relevant to this particular agenda item.
Mhm. So then I think we're all set with that agenda item. If everybody, sounds like everybody agrees with that it's time to move on. And th- what was this from Sanderson Carter? That doesn't relate. That relates to something else, doesn't it, Lee? And that's something that, oh, yes. This was simply a comment at this, it's included in our package just to bring it to our attention that it was really too late. I mean, it was practically as the town meeting was starting, a person emailed a comment. And then later that day, I think it was that day, the town manager's staff, actually it was the following Tuesday, the town manager's staff, Sandy, sent it to Lee for her attention. And it would be a comment that we would consider at the time when we actually have the special permit before us for the Carter Mill property.
Right, and Alex communicated that to her, so she's aware that she should comment at that point.
Okay, so that actually takes care of our agenda. And I just wanted to mention, I had mentioned before the meeting started to Alex Klee that I'll drop off some handwritten changes to a set of minutes that Alex had sent to me earlier today. And we now report from planning director and board members, Mr. Block.
I was just going to ask Lee if Lee, do you have an update on the traffic? I remember you mentioned something about a peer review of the traffic for Highway Commercial 1, not a peer review. I apologize.
Yes, GPI, Tony and I just had a meeting actually this afternoon with GPI on the draft report. They're revising 2 components of it that we're supposed to have by next week, Friday. And they're also putting together a PowerPoint that we're going to review for a presentation to the working group. So the results of that, so I will be scheduling with Kate probably a meeting of the working group, not for next week, but for either the week after that or the week following that. And I'm just was going to try to think about maybe having that meeting taped. So other members of the planning board, if they're interested in hearing the presentation on the traffic, and I think it's important that you try to make time to do that. You're able to hear GPI's presentation on the report. I will say that I think the news, just to share my impressions of the report, I think the news is good. It's basically showing the FAR that we asked them to look at, which is a 1.35 with commercial and office use and ancillary retail, being able to be accommodated through improvements that are doable at Gould and Highland and Central and Gould. The Central Gould Street location probably would require some takings, but I mean that it's physically possible to make improvements and to retain the level of service. One interesting thing that the study and the data shows is actually a reduction in trips that are happening in particular as a result of the ADA lane that's now taken effect. And that's in terms of trips on Gould Street or on Highland Avenue, making that right onto Gould Street. Those numbers have gone down. So there's been reductions in the trips from the work that I think Beta did in 2015.
Is it possible that some might say that the engineering analysis was skewed as a result of COVID?
No, I mean, they'll present the data to you. They use existing data and they use data that was collected before COVID. I mean, the state had done some counts when ADA lane was completed. So that data was used right before COVID happened. The town put some counters out and collected data on a couple key locations. And they can explain to you how they took those varying components of the data together to assimilate a picture of what the total number of trips were and what the distribution looked like.
That's great.
And just as a resident who remembers the Adelaide project, I wouldn't be surprised if the traffic counts that might have been high at that intersection were of people avoiding traveling under 128. everybody was doing that, whether by taking Honeywell Street or Gould Street and avoiding 128. And of course, once the project was completed, one no longer had to do that. So, I mean, it may be that if you compared the traffic at that intersection before the Adeline project even began, you wouldn't find that there had been a big change. But that's only speculation on my part.
So I think the results were positive.
Okay, results positive. That's the main thing.
That's my takeaway from the report.
Okay.
And are we, where do we fit in terms of our timing for, being able to present to the April town meeting?
Well, I'm going to set this meeting up. And so hopefully we can narrow down the traffic and what FAR we think is appropriate. And I don't know if there's going to be some other components the board wants to model. I've reached out to Natasha and I'm in the process of setting up the work with her, which would be the urban design plan that's going to come out of all of this. But I think once we figure out what the density is and the land use profile, I think we can the zoning can be drafted and finalized.
Thank you.
Lee, would you remind me, perhaps remind all of us, who is participating in the working group that you referred to?
It's 2 planning board members, 2 members of the Board of Selectmen, and 2 members of the Finance Committee.
Okay. Okay.
And the town manager and myself. But I think the presentation, I think I'll share with you all when we make these adjustments in the traffic study. I'll make sure that you all get a copy of that. I'll share with you their PowerPoint, and I'll make sure for those who can't attend their actual formal presentation that meeting is recorded so you can hear the presentation. And
will we all be given the opportunity, if we want to attend the presentation remotely?
Well, maybe we'll have to do a posted meeting. I mean, we were doing all this is just the work.
Yeah, that's true. If we're all,
let me speak with Kate. Let me speak with Kate and come up with a strategy. Would you all like to hear this formal presentation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm interested.
Let me communicate that to Kate, and maybe we can rethink how we move that along.
Yeah, and it wouldn't have to be a meeting that everybody felt obliged to attend, but if we were going to have a quorum, it would be posted.
We would post it. Okay.
All right, then. If there is no other business.
I have a quick one. Lee, not to beat a dead horse, but I just want to bring this up and make sure all the other members of the board hear this and see what their inclination is. This has to do with the Pollard School. The Pollard rear entrance exit onto Chestnut. Not Chestnut.
Dedham
I'm sorry?
Avenue.
Dedham Ave, excuse me. There is, this is required by our permit, there is a gate that's supposed to be down at all times except when there's an exiting bus. We wanted to make sure that that entrance exit was not used. Well, the gate has been apparently damaged in the open position and hasn't been closed in well over a year, maybe 2 years. Now, I know, of course, we all know that the schools have an awful lot on their plate right now. But it's in blatant disregard of our permit. And the question that I am asking all of you to comment on or think about at least is, do we want to press the school committee to get that fixed, or don't we at this time?
I have a question for you.
Any other members want to make a comment on that? Ted?
When you say blatant disregard, have we talked to them about it and they've ignored us, or they don't seem to be just paying attention?
Well, some time ago, I asked Lee to be in touch with them about getting it fixed. And I think Lee was in touch with them. And that was, I'm sure that was over a year ago. I don't know if Lee's had any, Lee, you can tell us. I don't know if you've had any more recent.
No, I haven't had anything. Just when you raised the issue before, I think I reached out to them about getting it addressed. I thought they took care of it. They didn't?
No.
So I would suggest that Lee reach out again and say, we talked to you about it a year ago. It appears you haven't addressed it in a year. What's your plan? And then I think probably we should take some action if they continue to ignore it. And we could have Dave do that, right? Dave is the enforcement authority of the planning board regulations.
He is.
Does that make sense to you, Lee?
Well,
That Dave?
let me reach out to the superintendent again. I think that's who I reached out to last time. I'll reach out to him again and report back at the next meeting.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
Everybody okay with that?
Yes, it does not seem like a huge project. If we were asking for something really major with a minor impact, I would hesitate, but this is a small thing as far as the amount of work or money that will go into repairing this. And traffic-wise, it may actually have an important impact. Oh, okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Lee. All right, then. Any other business? Yes, Mr. Alpert.
Yes, I'd like to just quickly report that last week we had a chairs, vice chairs meeting with the Board of Selectmen on the tree bylaw. And it was made, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeanne and Lee, it was made clear to us that that Ed Olson and the select board are not in favor of pursuing the tree bylaw because they feel that it will create an inordinate amount of work as drafted and as being implemented in like cities and towns, Wellesley, Lexington come to mind. And we don't have the staff for it at this time, and they feel that, and I think I'm putting words in their mouth, but I think they feel that the benefit of it would not justify the cost of increasing staff. They are talking about, or we did talk about, instead of doing this, being more proactive in creating a tree fund where developers, as part of their permit on the development, would be assessed a fee that would go into the tree fund so that the town would have funds to plant trees around town to mitigate the loss of trees on development, but to have a bylaw where we try to save trees on lots that are being developed and to assess fees based upon the number of trees that are being cut down or something like that would be too onerous to enforce, and that's their position right now. We are going to continue to talk about this. We are going to continue to talk about, if we go the route of a tree fund, having the planning board be part of the conversations about how that will be implemented and assessed. And Ed Olson did volunteer to have his friend who was his counterpart in Lexington come to a meeting and explain to us the work that their tree bylaw has created in Lexington. Did I summarize that accurately, Madam?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so impressed with your memory that you just summarized this meeting absolutely perfectly.
Given my age, I think that's quite a compliment. Thank you.
Really, that's exactly what was said and determined. So that's where we stand with the tree bylaw.
If I could just say, I've got one more thing I just wanted to update the board on. I'm preparing the budget for the Planning and Community Development Department, which we're on a shorter schedule this year, but it's actually due in a week and a half. And as part of that budget preparation, I'm including an identification of a request for a warrant article for monies for planning studies. And if you remember, I think in 2015, we got an allocation of $45,000, which was money that was put aside. So we have it available to do planning studies when issues arose. Those monies have been completely depleted. At the special town meeting in the spring, the town appropriated the $45,000, which we're using now for the GPI work that's being done. But the fund that we need to basically fund our planning studies moving forward is depleted. So I put in a request for $60,000, indicating, you know, a warrant article to that effect as part of the budget proposal. And also we included a refunding for the small repair grant program because we're going to exhaust all those funds this year. And so we're looking for, I think, $50,000 from the Housing Trust is asking for monies for that purpose, in addition to the normal just operational budget of the board.
That sounds reasonable, the 60,000 request for the annual town meeting for our department for the special studies.
Mhm.
I just want to mention one more thing that almost was on the agenda for tonight's meeting, and that is the draft 40B. I don't know if you call them regulations. Guidelines, yes. That I think Dan Matthews of the select board has drafted. And has that draft been sent around to all of us, Lee? I know it was sent
Yes.
to me. So be sure to take a good look at that. You know, as you know, even though Needham has met the minimum requirement of the state under 40B, Needham can still go forward and with approval of the select board and the zoning board of appeals. And our role is just to make recommendations, and there's no town meeting involvement. The town can go forward with so-called friendly 40Bs. And I'm supposing, I haven't read the draft regs yet, but I'm supposing that's the focus. The regs that it would replace were written at a time when the town was still reaching to meet that goal. So it's a very different situation we're in now.
Madam Chair, on that point, I think it begs a conversation for us to determine where we want to identify high density development.
You'll find, because I did start, Adam, by looking at the old regs, the ones that are like 5 or 6 years old. And that report did identify several sites in town, including, interesting, that I hadn't realized this before, the Hartney-Graymont site on Chestnut Street that then went down to defeat at town meeting. I had not realized that had been identified in this prior report as a suitable site.
It begs the question if should we re-examine as a planning board, identify certain strategic areas as goals for development. Personally, I would suggest that density around transportation is critical for a number of reasons. And Dan does call out all of us to look at, to identify, among other things, certain areas that may be priorities over others.
I think that's a very good point, because this is our opportunity. By responding to the request for input on these regs, it's our opportunity to have input into that.
That's right.
Did you say, Madam Chairman, that these proposed guidelines have been sent out to the board? Because I don't recall seeing it.
I emailed them a while back. I will re-forward it. I think I
Thanks, Lee.
emailed it to everybody when I received it.
Maybe just got by me. Okay.
And I happen to have the old, I just have a housing file because I'm kind of interested in housing, and I had the old regs in my housing file, so I just pulled them out to compare them.
Okay.
I'll resend it out, Marty, and I thought both of them were attached, the old and the new, but if not, I'll attach the old ones.
Yeah, it's useful, I think, to compare.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll do it again. It's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, then, so we have a lot of our agenda this time was light, but I know our agenda on November 4th is going to be a busy agenda, so we should be prepared for that.
What do
All
we have,
right.
so that we can prepare? What are we gonna have on the 4th besides Children's Hospital?
The Children's Hospital is the 17th. On the
Okay.
4th, I think you're going to have Petco. No,
Okay,
it wasn't Petco, the fuel cell from TripAdvisor that was continued.
right.
We're going to have the 40B. Alex, you're going to have to chime in here.
So 390 Grove Street has been going on for many a month. And the last continuation was to that date. Whether the hearing opens is another story.
Right, okay.
Mhm.
What do we have on the 17th besides Children's Hospital?
We have 140 Kendrick Street, which is basically the parametrics building.
Mhm.
What else do we have, Alex?
That's gonna be a
Those
long,
are the only two things that I can think of.
Okay.
yeah, but those two things alone, I think are gonna
Our
generate a
whole,
long
our,
night.
our whole evening.
Mhm. Right. Well, on the 4th of November, the election will be, will we get any sleep the night of the 3rd? I don't know. All right. Well,
I
if we're,
I think whether we get any sleep depends on the results.
yes,
Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes.
just a quick question. We did receive another letter from, I put it in my file, from Doosan about the hearing. Was that properly noticed? As the proper, there was a problem with, there was a deficiency in the named party as the applicant.
We fixed that on the fuel cell. We got all the proper information, and it was reflected in the application and in the notice.
And
yeah, I happened to see that in the Needham Times and I noted those changes in the advertisement.
and there was a similar problem with another applicant on a separate matter. Was that also similarly resolved?
We resolved all of them. We've gotten updated applications.
Great. I move to adjourn, Madam Chair.
Wait a minute. I have a question about that. The one that, what was his name? Walter Benalia or something like that? Didn't we decide that had to be renoticed?
We did. We renoticed TripAdvisor, and we got an application that was signed by the property owner and by the appropriate representative at TripAdvisor. And then the ad itself was written to make it clear that it was a TripAdvisor building.
Okay, no, it's just that I thought Adam was asking if it had been renoticed, and I didn't hear anybody say yes, it was renoticed. But okay, now I get it.
All right, then, we have a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second,
Mr. Alpert seconds. So I'll do the roll call on the motion to adjourn. Mr. Jacobs,
Aye.
Mr. Block,
Aye.
Mr. Alpert,
aye.
Mr. Owens,
Aye.
and the chair is aye, so we stand adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I
Thank
sit
you.
adjourned.
Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.